Well, welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee. Before we commence the meeting, I request that all mobile phones are turned off or switched to silent. Thanks very much. My name is Councillor Westgalt and I chair this meeting of the committee, and I will start by introducing my fellow councillors. On my left is Councillor Jim Park, Councillor Felicity Sinfield, Councillor Nick Stavro is an empty seat, but he is on the screen behind me tonight. Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth, our Mayor, and welcome back, Councillor Gillies. On the right-hand side of the chamber is Councillor Cynthia Watson, Councillor Gary Thompson, Councillor Jane Addis, Councillor Susan Bigger, and Councillor Victor Franco. I acknowledge our Coordinator Governance, Ms. Kirsten Ritchie, I apologise, I should know it by now, shouldn't I? To my left is Director Urban Living, Mr. Scott Walker, on my right-hand side, and there are other officers in the chamber who we will introduce as they come forward to present reports. Moving to general information. The Urban Planning Delegate Committee meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube to enable public viewing this evening. The meeting is also being recorded and will be made available on Council's YouTube again as soon as practicable after the meeting. The primary purpose of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee is to deal with issues under the Planning and Environment Act and the Building Act. The committee has delegated authority to make decisions on behalf of Council. For those of you who are presenting, and I understand there are a number, when it comes to that item in the agenda, it will be introduced by an officer who will give a report. I will then call you one by one to come forward and join us at the horseshoe table. If you are making a submission, please present your viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the planning application. Please don't repeat things that earlier speakers have said, and keep your submission focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. If you're opposed to the planning application, please tell the committee why you disagree and suggest alternative approaches that would satisfy your concerns. Please focus on your concerns rather than matters of history or details in the officer's report. There will be a strict limit of 3 minutes, as previously, for each speaker, including councillors, and whilst as chair I can vary this time, I seldom do. At the 2.5 minute mark, the bell will ring, and that will indicate you have 30 seconds left to complete your submission. For those in the gallery this evening, I would like to take this opportunity to remind you to extend all due courtesy and respect to each other and to the committee as a whole. This includes remaining quiet while others are addressing the meeting and not disrupting the decision-making process of the committee. And just to finish, I would like to encourage all submitters and officers and councillors to speak directly into the microphone. I'm doing it more directly myself now. And this will ensure that everyone can clearly hear the discussions. Moving to apologies. Ms. Ritchie, have we any apologies tonight?
Thank you, Chair. There are no apologies for tonight's meeting.
Moving then to item 1 on the agenda, adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting held on the 6th of May this year. Councillors, can I please have a motion to adopt the minutes of this urban planning meeting? Councillor Thompson.
Happy to move those minutes.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hollingsworth, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Is anyone opposed? No one's opposed. I put the motion to the vote. All of those in support. I declare the motion carried. Moving to item 2, declaration of conflicts of interest. I understand, Councillor Thompson, you may be declaring one later on in the meeting. Well, very shortly.
Yes, I think it might be the very next agenda item.
That's right. Thank you. Does anyone else have a conflict of interest tonight? Terrific. Well, let's move straight on to the body of the meeting. 3.1 is 261 to 267 High Street Q. Proposed amendment to the planning permit conditions to enable 24-hour opening 7 days a week for an existing convenience restaurant. That's PP 94 00095.01. And I would probably start off this meeting by saying we did hear issues and submissions on this a number of weeks ago, and we put it to one side because I believe that we wanted to give the owner an opportunity to comment on some of the proposals coming to the meeting. I presume that has now happened. I understand it has. So we're hearing this, strictly speaking, for the second time. So let's move directly to Officer's Report. Ms. Daniela Splitgerber, if you could present your report. Thanks very much.
Through you, Mr Chair. I present UPDC item number 3.1 for the amendment to planning permit for the land at 261 to 267 High Street Q. The current planning permit was issued on the 13th of December 1994, allowing the use and development of a cafe takeaway food premises with ancillary drive-through facility, park, playland, car park and landscaping. The permit places restrictions on current trading hours. As a planning permit has already been granted, the matters for consideration today relate only to the proposed amendments. The merits of the original application cannot be revisited. To briefly summarise the planning amendment to date, an amendment to the planning permit was submitted to Council to operate the McDonald's store 24 hours, 7 days a week. The application was placed on public notice and 16 objections have been received. The objections predominantly relate to safety and security, waste, traffic and amenity concerns. Following a community consultation conducted on the 6th of February 2024, the applicant has made formal modifications to the request and has also given verbal offers as how other issues could be addressed. On the 15th of April 2024, the Urban Planning Delegated Committee resolved to defer consideration of the proposal to a future meeting to give an opportunity for the applicant to further consider a response to issues raised. The response from the applicant is to continue with the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week trade, but to restrict all nights to drive-through only between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. It is suggested that additional conditions should be also included to restrict the customer car parking on site between the hours of 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. each day so that only staff can park on the site during these times. It is recommended that Council issue a notice of decision to grant an amended planning permit subject to the conditions detailed in the report, which capture the further offer from the applicant and conditions to provide the appropriate management of car parking and noise emissions. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Tonight, we have 7 people in the gallery wishing to make submissions. 6 have indicated they are against the proposal and 1 in support. Once I announce your name, please come forward and sit at the head of the horseshoe table. If a submitter is not present when their name is called, we will move immediately on to the next speaker. I remind submitters that there is a strict time limit of 3 minutes. And I'd also ask you to remember to start your submissions with your name and the suburb in which you live. First submitter tonight is Mr. Rob Hesselov. If you'd just come forward, thanks very much.
And I have a presentation to show.
Can you come forward a little bit and speak into the microphone? Thanks very much.
You'll operate? Good. Okay, thanks very much for the opportunity. My name is Rob Heslov and I live in Kew in number 2 Packington Street. And if the next slide, please, and the next slide, please. Currently, if people want to find McDonald's out of hours, they only need to drive less than 9 minutes in any direction to find 24-hour operation. So why can these sites be 24 hours? Because there are no residents close by the drive-through, unlike at McDonald's Q. For example, next slide. Next slide. At Prahran McDonald's, There's no residents nearby, and the drive-through doesn't bother anyone at night. Next slide. Balwyn, the closest residents are 32 metres away. Next slide. At McDonald's in Richmond, that has only business premises nearby, and the closest residents are 32 metres away. Sorry, wrong one, Richmond. The closest residents are 60 metres away, over Church Street. Next slide, please. Next slide. But the Kew McDonald's circumstances are quite different. They're quite unique. And I want to show councillors just how close we are to McDonald's. Number 2, 6, 8 and 10 Packington Street properties abut the McDonald's fence line directly. Cars travel within 8 metres of the rear of these properties, playing music, phone calls, etc., and then stop with engines idling and shout their order about 1 metre from the rear of number 8. This layout is completely unlike the layout of other McDonald's within a few metres of a residential 1 property. Could you click the screen? And again. No, back 1 step. And again. Click again. That's right, you let it do it. You see how the car goes up the side, close to all those properties, and then it doesn't back down, but it comes down. The point is how, up at the back there, the drive-through, it is literally on the back step of those properties. If you give me the next slide, please. You can see this is the back of number 6, actually. That the back of the property is a couple of metres from the fence, and a few metres out from that is where the cars are actually travelling, and that red dot is where the request speaker is. Next slide. Next slide. So we come to this meeting with some positive suggestions. Firstly, our preference is to deny the permit application, but if we can't get that, we believe an acoustic fence fit for purpose for high contrast noise, one providing better noise attenuation, can be provided, because the existing one was built in 1994.
Mr. Heslev, I'll have to ask you to wrap up shortly. I know, have you much to go?
Okay, no, I'm nearly done. And we'd also like the drive-through shut between 1 and 6 and allow pedestrian access through the eastern door where there are no residents to disturb. And finally, I just want to say that this has been going on for a number of years, this sort of conversations. We've had this proposal before, and it's very stressful for the residents, and the fact that they're here tonight, I think, is a tribute to everybody.
Thank you,
So,
Mr.
thank you.
Heslev. I'll now open it to the floor. Councillors, are there any questions of this presenter tonight? No? You can return to the gallery. Thanks very much for your presentation. The next presenter is Jeff Goff. I'm not too sure that's your full name, but if you just start with that, that'd be great.
It's Jeanette Goff. Thank you for the opportunity. I presented last time as well. First of all, I'm opposed to...
Can you just start with your name? It's formal procedure and
Yep.
the suburb in which you live. Thanks very much.
It's Jeanette Goff and I live in Kew.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm opposed to the extension of the trading for 24/7. McDonald's fast food planning permit was issued in 1994 to develop the land with reasonable restrictions to protect local residents' peace and well-being, and to operate without the interruption of noise while doing business. The driveway causes noise and will be intolerable if it operates between 1 and 6. We have read from the planning department that if McDonald's applied today, there would be no need for a planning permit. They could just open. But the building department, first of all, I'd like to point out that there was a change in the zone to commercial, but the residents still live in a residential zone. So they are still expecting to have peace and tranquility in their own zone. They do expect uninterrupted sleep, and so they should get it. The planning department states on the website that the team consider how land in Boroondara is used and developed and how the character and livability of the local area is impacted. That's the building department. So if McDonald's came along to build that building today, the building department would still have to decide how the building would impact on the residents. With the 24-hour driveway service, it impacts to an intolerable level. So I feel it's not a fait accompli. I feel you're obligated to check how the residents are going to be impacted. I would guarantee Mr. and Mrs. McDonald's live in a residential zone and they would expect to have uninterrupted sleep themselves, even if they backed onto a commercial zone. I actually feel, I was listening tonight on the radio and I heard that endangered animals are protected and they would probably have more protection than the residents here from noise. The area where the fast food McDonald's is unique. McDonald's commercial backing onto residential. If you look at Q Junction, the businesses from the Q Junction right up to KFC, which is about 3 kilometres, if any of those businesses open 24/7, it would not impact on residents, but this impacts on residents because it is unique.
Thank you, Mrs. Goff. Can I get you to wrap up fairly shortly? Thank you.
Yep. One more thing I would like to say. I feel the councillors had the power to reject this application. In the planning permit granted in 1994, it says, if in the opinion of the City of Boroondara, the responsible authority, noise levels generated through activity on the site are exceeding the levels set by the above described policies, EPA, the use shall be regulated to the satisfaction of the City of Boroondara and the responsible authority.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you just remain in your seat, we do have Councillor Addis has a question.
Yes.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your presentation. The extra conditions that are in the officer report, have you had a chance to look at them? I'm looking particularly at 22, which talks about restricting parking basically on the westerly side of the car park is the way I'm reading this, adjacent to 268 Packington. And
Yeah.
You don't think that makes an adequate difference?
Well, I think as Rob Haslev showed, where people are going to enter into the driveway, it impacts every one of those residents as cars drive in and go through. It doesn't matter that the parking is closed off there because they would get in and turn their car off and walk over. I know we're not going, you don't want to allow pedestrians, but when we spoke last time, all the residents agreed that has no effective solution to stopping the noise. The noise is generated from the driveway where people drive in, and we tolerate that through the day, but from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m, the sustained noise is going to be a major problem.
Can I just have a follow-up? And the use of the chain to stop some drive-through, that...
It's not going to stop the drive-through. All it's going to do is stop people parking on that side. People are still going to be able to drive through, as Rob showed on that video, drive all the way through, wait. Motorbikes are going to be waiting for their order. They're going to give their order, so it's going to impact that sustained noise.
Thank you.
Constantly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. Councillor Stavro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question along the lines, Ms. Goff, of Councillor Addis. In your experience, do you believe that some sort of acoustic treatment could suppress the noise enough of, say, a motorbike or a loud vehicle, or perhaps music going on in the sort of middle hours of the morning?
Are you asking me or Councillor Addis?
No, the
No.
question is to you, Mrs. Goff. Thank you.
Right, yes. Well, we have done some research, and up-to-date fencing that is quite substantial, that would mean a large investment from McDonald's, may suppress the noise, but I'd like to see the results of Walmart. We've contacted, that is the gold standard now, that they do go. So Walmart are a company that do acoustic fencing. It's quite, I believe it's somewhat effective, but I don't know how much. So between 1 and 6, I'm wondering how effective it's going to be, but it is a measure to assist in softening the noise.
Councillor Stavro, does that answer your question?
Yes, I've got a follow-up if I could, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So has this, Ms. Goff, been discussed with the applicant or with the officers as to the kind of fencing that you have done the investigations on?
I think I'd like to refer Mary Heslop. She probably would be able to detail that further.
Thank you.
Thank you. There appear to be no more questions tonight. You could just return to the gallery if you wouldn't mind. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I will now call upon Ms. Y. Lee, if you'd like to join us at the table. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Ely, the owner of 8 Parkington Street. As I mentioned in the last meeting...
Sorry, I know I've announced you, but do you mind starting with your name as well as your
Yeah,
first
I'm
name?
Ely, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. As I mentioned in the last meeting, the acoustic report is not independent. It gives you the wrong information and will cause you make the wrong decision. And my master bedroom is just at the back of McDonald's drive-through. It's here. It's less than 2 meters from my noisy diary. And you can see that every night and early morning, the engine noises from its drive-through, shows. It's seriously, especially from the motorcycle, seriously affected my sleep. I have already bought and set, this is acoustic panels on the wall of our bedroom, and I also sealed the fence on my side. I also bought a white noise machine, a loop quiet earplug, and an Apple noise cancelling earbud. I mean, I did everything I could to reduce the noise ourselves, but still without success. Now you can know how bad the current noise emissions are around the community every day and night. I would like to emphasize again that there's currently only a normal timber fence on the boundary. As you can see in the photo, we can't call it an acoustic fence, or nowadays it's far below any acoustic standard. So only just sealing it or repair it won't help enough. I also would like to point out that because motorcycles don't have silencers, the noise they make is most serious. I have a photo searched online about the sound levels. You can see that motorcycle noise is above 100 dB. That's even louder than a lawnmower. You can imagine that from 1 to 6 a.m., most drive-through vehicles are motorcycles, which are mostly takeaway deliveries. Councillors, we all have the experience that even if you sit in a well-isolated car, if the motorcycle passed by, you can still hear its shockingly noise. That's exactly what I experience every late night and early morning in my bedroom. Now, I just begged for protecting us and left us the only left 5 hours of peaceful sleep from 1 to 6 a.m. I request a separate new real acoustic fence or wall, just like this, similar to this, and should be set up, and a third-party acoustic report should be done to make sure to address the noise to meet the environmental protection regulation. And I shall request the motorcycles must not allow to enter the drive-through like after 10 p.m. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any queries and questions of this submitter? There are none. Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery.
Yep.
I now call upon Miss Mary Breast. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Mary Breast. I live at number 2 Packington Street. My house is a double story with bedrooms upstairs. 2 sides of my property abut McDonald's car park and drive-through. In my previous appeal to councillors, I begged that McDonald's not be granted 24-hour trading. I explained how the noise of cars, trucks and motorbikes driving within 8 metres of my bedroom window affect my quality of sleep and in turn my quality of life. My neighbours are affected similarly. After discussions, we neighbours agreed that if 24-hour trading was to be granted, that closing the drive-through altogether would be something that we could tolerate. Keeping the store limited to people parking in and entering from High Street would bear the least impact on us. I feel council has completely abandoned us. Not only has 24-hour training been suggested, but drive-through now the only option that's directing more traffic our way. It's our worst nightmare, literally. Closing the car parking doesn't reduce the impact on us. It helps in terms of slamming doors and cars starting and stopping, but it does not help noise from cars, motorbikes and trucks driving through, often playing loud music, and this often causes me to wake in fright. Traffic directly past our bedroom windows within metres of our beds is too noisy in the middle of the night. McDonald's has no control of the noise their patrons' cars make, nor the music they play. A Harley Davidson or a Ferrari can come to a drive-through. McDonald's can't stop them. A management plan can't stop them. Why are they inviting them to drive past our bedrooms? They're inviting customers and business at great expense to the neighbours and community. We're suffering as McDonald's profits. McDonald's cannot stop the foot traffic from High Street. People will see the drive-through operating and assume the main entrance is open. They'll walk down the path and bang on the door that is directly opposite my bedroom window. McDonald's can only ask people to stop banging on the door after I've already been disturbed. In point 2, the officers the recommendation states, a requirement to build an acoustic fence. This has been a long-standing requirement even before the idea of 24-hour operation. The current fence is not up to the standard required for shutting out noise of a drive-through. We have video evidence on our phone of Liz and I talking in normal voices right through the fence. We also hear music from cars, we hear people's orders at the drive-through speakers. We hear people on their phones. The acoustic fencing needs to be upgraded and made fit for purpose. We have contacted Walmart and their recommendation for this site is a Technico system with a rough price for 250 metres of fencing at 2.4 metres high is $125,000. Council insists on a management plan, but McDonald's has a very poor track record of following the guidelines they're supposed to be operating within at the moment. We get delivery trucks arriving before 8 a.m. In fact, as recently as this morning, before 7:30. Could you just wrap up? Thank you. Yeah, I will. This morning before 7:30 and Friday before 7. And this is despite the fact that McDonald's happily accepted this as a condition of operation. It's easy to promise compliance to a plan that you've got no intention to follow or capability to control. In summary, we're not against 24-hour business, we are simply against the drive-through. McDonald's do not adhere to council regulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Bigot.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Breast. Thank you so much. Two questions. One, if the acoustic, is your view that if this acoustic fence were there, then it would be tolerable with what is proposed otherwise?
I have not lived next to an acoustic fence in my experience, so I do not know what a before and after is like. But my assumption is, seeing that they're required on freeways and seeing they're nearly in all other drive-through facilities that are close to neighbours, I'm assuming that it is better than the wooden fence that we've got.
Sure. Yeah, and fair enough, better is not necessarily, it's hard to know.
I
Yeah,
can't speak
fair
from
enough.
experience. I
Second
don't know.
question. And this could be my recollection, I could be remembering wrong, but the last meeting, I felt that there was quite a lot of discussion actually about the parking and about if the parking weren't, that it seemed to me that there were concerns about the door slamming and things like that, and it felt like that actually the concern was more about people parking and pedestrian access. But now we've actually said the proposal is actually to not do that and in an attempt to try to address some of these concerns. Has your view changed?
Yeah, look, I understand that the councillors probably think that closing off the car parking is enough, but it's not, because that Harley Davidson that's going through the drive-through is going to make the same amount of noise as it parks its car as it drives through the drive-through. The door slamming, yes. And perhaps the congregating in the car park, yes, it will stop that sort of talking. But cars at night time often play music, and the music is disruptive. Look, closing the car park is a concession, but closing the drive-through was what we requested last time, because the drive-through is the biggest nuisance.
Yeah, so basically, just to clarify, you're saying that in your best world, you would have no drive-through and no, while there would be pedestrian access, it would only be parking on High Street, no parking in the parking lot. That's what you're suggesting?
Yeah, there's two places where pedestrians can access. One is on the western side, which is close to the neighbours, and the other is on the eastern side of the store. The eastern side of the store abuts shops, and that door, if people walk through that door, we won't hear it.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Bigger. Councillor Gillies.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Just a moment.
Sorry.
One of my questions you've actually answered. The second question is, have you kept or have you been asked to keep a noise diary?
Yes, Yi has. I've kept one. I'm not as religious as she is. She's fantastic at keeping notes. I'm not so great. But yes, I do have a noise diary of a normal operation, obviously not between 1 and 6. But every day we could write something down. But it's okay during the day. If someone comes past with loud music while I'm doing my cooking or cleaning or in the garden, it's okay. We don't mind that. It's 1 o'clock in the morning is a different scenario.
And for the hours, if I may, Chair, for the hours that you have kept or the occasions you have kept it, even from, say, 9 or 10 p.m. through till 1, would you have any records then of frequency of activity and noise?
Sure.
You do? Okay, thank you.
And there's trucks that come past at that time as well. And the trucks are awful. They rumble.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. We still have another question. Councillor Stavro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Brest, just to clarify, I think the updated proposal is that the car parking will be closed and the restaurant will be closed, only the drive-through will be operating. Are you saying that with an appropriate acoustic fence and appropriate will remain to be seen what that is, you will be comfortable for the proposal to move forward? Is that what you're saying?
What we're saying is our best case scenario is no drive-through and the store can be open 24 hours for foot traffic and people parking in High Street. The acoustic fencing should really be there anyway because, as Councillor Gillies pointed out, it's quite noisy up until 1 o'clock in the morning. So the acoustic fencing, we believe, is something that should be done anyway. It probably should have been done differently all those years ago.
Thank you, Ms. Brest.
Thanks, Councillor Franco. We have one more question.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to understand as well, following on from the discussion of last week, and what your preferences are. And correct me if I'm wrong, did you say that the current proposal is worse with the drive-through than without having the drive-through?
Yes.
So cars coming in, parking and walking in
Yes.
without the drive. So you prefer to allow the parking that come in and just walk in rather than drive through?
We prefer the parking not be in their car park, but the parking after 1 a.m. in the morning be in High Street queue. So the site is closed off, the gate's closed off, so that there's no access to the parking and access to the drive-through are the same access. So if you close that access point, people can only walk into the store.
And last week, or whenever it was, at the last meeting, I understood that the core concern, or one of the core concerns, was people stopping, talking, being parked there. With a drive-through, presumably people just drive through, they don't stop and talk. I mean,
They talk on their phones while they're waiting in a queue, while they're queued up, and you can hear people on their phones, and they play music.
Okay.
So they're not talking to each other in a car park, but they're making a similar noise.
Okay, thanks.
I think that now exhausts the questions. You may return to the gallery. Thanks very much. I now call upon Mrs. Elizabeth Hung.
Hello, I am Elizabeth and live number 6 Packington Street.
Thank you.
Right, I got a few photos here, and sorry that I didn't bring it earlier, but anyway, it's just to take this photo, which is just behind the fence of where I live. And this is the vehicle just bang into the lamp pole, the light pole there. And it has been there for months or year, I don't know. And then, so you can see that, it's almost touching the fence, and nobody know about it, and nobody did anything about it either. So that I don't know what McDonald administration is doing with maintaining the safety in the area. Well, McDonald has contributed tremendously to the world food market. It gives people a home feeling while they are overseas. However, trading hours from after 12, after 1 o'clock to 6 a.m. in the morning is unviable to the residents who live close by or just next to the McDonald premises without proper safeguarding facilities and also acoustic fence. We have been putting up with this during the daytime because we want to keep a good relationship and not to, in the daytime that you are not there all the time, so it is okay. But during the nighttime when it is all quiet and noise, that I believe that you all understand that the noise will be louder at nighttime. And this is, you cannot really say this is wrong. This is no reality, it is true. And it's a fact as well.
Chair, can I just ask, would it be possible, and if my colleagues or if you agree, that we could get an explanation as to what the photos we're seeing, because the conversation...
I was going to see if it's essential to your presentation. We've just got the photographs up on the screen now. Do you want us to quickly go through them?
Yes, I just took the photo from there. It's just to show that the vehicle has damage there when they are parking.
Thank you.
And the area is so, it's not long enough for them to, if they want to go further, that will be in my backyard.
Okay, thank you.
And this is a safety, which I have been stressed on.
Does that complete the photographs? There's one more.
And this is just to show, where my house is close to the fence.
Thank you very much. So if that probably brings you to the bell point, but 30 seconds beyond that would be fine.
That's fine, I'm finishing anyway.
Finish, thank you very much.
Okay, and so far, I know all this issue has been addressed, but the realistic situation is not solved at all. And it will be very difficult for the resident. And I believe that all the councillors here are very fair. However, that we should, I know that it's a commercial district now. However, that you still have to consider the local residents rather than just for the business, which is only for profit, personal profit.
If you just remain in your seat for a moment, we have some questions.
Okay.
Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I'm just wondering how long you've lived there.
I lived there for 2 years.
Thank you very much.
But I have owned the house for a long time.
Councillor Gillies.
One more
just
question,
a minute,
if you may.
excuse me, could you stay? We have another question.
One more question, if I may. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, so could you clarify for me, please, those images we just saw with that wooden paling fence?
Yeah.
Is that the proposed location for the acoustic fence?
Yes, that is the acoustic fence that McDonald has been saying. This is acoustic, but it's not.
Really? That's what you're saying, isn't it?
No, because, I mean, daytime, people are talking, yelling, shouting, screaming over the other side. I hear every single thing.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hung. I call upon Kate Crock. And I understand, Mrs. Crock, you're presenting on behalf of someone else, so maybe it's their name and address you should use tonight. Thank you.
Well, my name's Kate Crock. I am a resident of Kew, and I actually used to live in Charles Street, just down from the McDonald's, so I can attest to all the rubbish. I am proxy for Mrs. Maria Cocci and Mr. Carl Cocci, and they are opposed to the proposed amendment.
Thank you very much.
I'm reading their statement. Pardon me. We are currently overseas and unable to attend this meeting regarding the extended operating hours of McDonald's and have asked me to read out our objection. Kate, sorry. Thank you for your time to hear our issues relating to the proposed 24 opening. Our background with the area and geographic proximity to Kew McDonald's is as follows. My parents, Reg and Josephine Wilson, purchased number 10 and 12 Packington Street, Kew in 1948. In 1950, they sold number 12. Number 10 has been our family home since this time, 76 years. My father passed in 1993 and my mother in 2019. My husband and I now own the property that my family grew up in. I write this to give some context about our history with McDonald's. Our property runs along the northern boundary and we share a 12-metre fence. Their drive-through runs along this boundary. When McDonald's was to be built, they had wanted to buy a slice of our backyard. It was an awkward acquisition as it cut diagonally across the block. It also would have taken down trees that my father planted, leaving us with an obscure parcel of land so McDonald's could extend their drive-through. My mother, albeit on a legacy pension, was steadfast in not yielding and refused the sale. A high fence went up, courtesy of McDonald's. I found out recently that this was meant to be an acoustic fence, but we've seen that's clearly just a paling fence. As the drive-through speakers are just metres from our boundary line, we hear every single order. Although this has been the case for the past few years, it was not until faced with the prospect that this may now be continuous for 24 hours, it has escalated our concerns. It also makes us question, should the drive-through ever have been positioned so close to a residential boundary? My late mother, although she fought to keep her land, probably didn't have the fight to take on such matters. I would ask if the new owners of McDonald's would accept in their home or garden 24 hours of food orders. I would think not. Our other concern is the air conditioning units. They run 24/7. There is no reprieve. At 3 a.m, the noise of these units can be heard, and I would suggest finding a soundproofing solution would be beneficial to the residents who live in Packington Street. Our other concerns are that of safety. Kew is relatively safe. A big part of that is that by 11 p.m, most businesses are closed. When you introduce a commercial premises opening beyond that, you are inviting trouble. This not only extends to the residents around your business, but to your staff, which historically we know are usually young adults? Will you provide security to ensure that at this time of night or early morning, every precaution is taken to protect basically these children who in all honesty will have to deal with people who are probably inebriated? I'm sure our lovely Packington Street residents will have more valid points, which they obviously have done. I do question for the mere few hours of extra opening hours
Ms
is not
Crock,
worth
can
the
I ask you to start to wrap up? That'd be great, thank you.
discontent of essentially your neighbours and new and old members of this street. Thank you for hearing us out.
Now, I know you're presenting for someone else tonight, but are you able to answer questions if we have any?
I'll do my best.
Do we have any? We don't. You're off the hook.
Yay.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Alice Maloney, if you'd please join us at the table. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name's Alice Maloney. I'm a planner from Ratio Consultants in Cremorne. The Council Officer's report helpfully details the background history of the project, the site, that it has been operating since 1994. There are 100 seats, and the site was notably rezoned from the residential 1 zone to the commercial 1 zone in 2017, given it's located within the Kew Major Activity Centre. My client took over the franchise last year. Since that time, they've created 40 new jobs at the restaurant, and 95% of the 130 staff members all live within Boroondara. It's expected if we could achieve 24/7 operations, this would result in up to an additional 25 jobs at the restaurant. My clients are experienced McDonald's staff members. They've been working at McDonald's for over 30 years and own other franchises within Melbourne, including in Collingwood, Richmond and St Kilda Road. So they are well versed in the operation of restaurants, and those are all 24/7 restaurants. In relation to the conditions, there was a lot of debate regarding the acoustic fencing last time. We had the opportunity to get some additional advice from Clarity Acoustics, who have said the installed timber fences achieve the minimum surface density of 12 kilograms per metre squared, however, include gaps and holes where palings have warped over time. It should be noted that providing fencing with a surface density of greater than 12 kilograms per metre squared will not result in any additional noise attenuation compared to the installed acoustic fences after the gaps are rectified. But they have also confirmed that timber fencing is a suitable acoustic treatment, subject to it meeting the required surface density. They also provided other recommendations in the acoustic report, which we submitted after the consultation meeting, including the need to provide further acoustic treatment to the refrigeration unit on the rooftop, and that has been captured within the proposed planning permit conditions. There's also the requirement for the site management plan, and there's one potential concern we have respectfully with regard to condition 22 and the need to close off the western car spaces. That is somewhat challenging operationally. McDonald's practice is really not to have staff exit the building at dark, so during their shifts, which would sort of otherwise be required if they need to go out there and move cars to get them out of the western car spaces. So
Ms. Maloney, I'll have to get you to wrap up fairly shortly, thank you.
So that is just a bit of a concern operationally for McDonald's about that aspect of the proposed conditions. But I'm happy to take further questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to clarify, is your understanding the treatment or proposed treatment to provide additional acoustic benefit, is it to just patch where there are existing gaps? Is that the extent of your
Yeah, for the fencing, it's just repairing gaps and ensuring they're all closed up is required just for the acoustic fencing, but then there's additional works to the rooftop of the building.
equipment, but yeah, I think you clearly heard the fence is the primary issue with the objectors here tonight.
Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify that that's the extent of it. Thank you.
No worries.
Councillor Stavro.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Just obviously the reference to the 95 jobs and the 25 new jobs is a way of letting us know how much contribution you're making to the community. Clearly, you're not talking about full-time employment there, right?
Not full-time employment.
So what's the quantum in full-time employment?
Approximately half of that.
So 40 full-time employees.
It's 130 staff, so that's my maths.
65?
65, yes.
Full-time employees, 65. Okay.
Equivalent.
Are you sure about that, or? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, would you be?
Councillor Stavro, do you want to rephrase your question and the...
I'm trying to understand that. So was the response that 65 full-time employees are working at the McDonald's site on average?
Maybe if we can rephrase that to equivalent full-time employees, are you able to approximately estimate that tonight?
Yes. I have 130 employees, of which approximately half of them work full-time currently. So that's 65 employees. I worked this out because they all work...
Sorry, just for the benefit of especially the gallery, could you speak into the microphone? Is that possible? That's all right. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, Peter Burkhardt, I'm the owner of McDonald's Q.
Thank you. Would you mind repeating what you've just told us so everyone can hear it? Thank you very much.
I have 130 employees at the McDonald's Q restaurant, of which there's a mixture of full-time and part-time employees. Based on the average number of hours per employee per week, they would work 17 to 20 hours, which equates to roughly 65 full-time jobs, 60 perhaps.
Councillor Stavro, are you happy with that response?
I'm happy. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. While the owner is there as well, so the McDonald's store was bought last year. Were you aware of the conditions on the purchase?
I was aware when I purchased the restaurant that it didn't trade 24 hours.
Yeah.
And I knew that was the original planning permit from more than 30 years ago, yes. I was also made aware that it had been rezoned in 2017 and then therefore pursued the opportunity to make an amendment to the planning permit.
Thank you.
Ms. Maloney, since you're the presenter tonight, are you happy to accept those words as part of your presentation? We're happy to.
Thank you.
Might I suggest that he be offered a seat and not? I mean, this is quite bizarre the way that.
I'm happy to do that. Would you like to take a seat? But remembering that ratio of the presenter tonight, so we're really working through you, Ms. Maloney.
That's fine.
That's okay. Is that the extent of the questions that we have tonight?
I have a couple of more, Mr. Chair. I know it's difficult to do it over the teleconference, but can I just ask you then, would you contemplate in establishing a much more substantial acoustic fence to address the issues that you've heard tonight?
I'm happy to answer the question. I'm happy to have a look at it. I'm just following the planning process. I believe that the fence that we have installed meets standards. I've got advice to the effect that it does. If there's something that I can do that would improve the quality of life of my neighbours, I'm more than happy to. I've said that in several council forums. I said it in the council engagement meeting. I'm happy to invest in the building and I'm happy to continue to invest in the building. I'm just asking for the ability to continue to grow my business and for us also to operate our business the same way in which we do our other McDonald's restaurants, which I do very successfully. But to answer your question, I'm happy to have a look at it. I just need to understand what the specification that's required is, because my understanding is that we're meeting building code and specification currently.
Thank you, Mr. Burkett. You are an experienced McDonald's operator, as you've said repeatedly, and we've had these conversations before. So I guess what I'm a little bit perplexed is why hasn't a little bit of work gone into trying to provide some acoustic fence options? That's what my question really is. As we've seen...
Thank you. Good question. I think that we needed to establish whether it does or doesn't meet the acoustic standards. I believe that we have. If we're falling short or there's something more that we can do, we'll do so. I've repaired the fence as soon as I was made aware of the cracks and gaps, which hasn't been noted in this, but that has been remedied well before the previous meeting. I've also planted additional plants through the drive-through, which gives more acoustic attenuation, but it's going to take some months for the plants that I planted to grow through this season and into summer. So I'm happy to consider any other options. I think up until this point in time, we believe that we had something that meets specification, which I believe we do.
Thank you.
But I'm happy to bolster it and to do more if we need to.
Thank you.
I've not been made aware of, I think we mentioned a product called Hallmark in this meeting. I've not been made aware of this product, but I'm happy to investigate it.
Okay. Councillor Stavro, are you happy with that response?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes.
Now, there are quite a number of other questions to follow. Strictly speaking, this meeting is meant to complete at 7:30. I believe I've got leeway for 15 minutes, so see if we can get through the questions. Then we'll need to adjourn the UBDC and start the council meeting and then return to it, so bear with us. Councillor Park, you were up on the screen a while ago. You're still waiting to put a question?
Yes, Chair. Ms Maloney, I just would like you to repeat what you said about the fencing before, because as I heard it, you actually have expert advice that specifically looked at and assessed that fence. So I'd like the benefit of hearing that again, because it seems that there's a bit of confusion around the table about that. So could we just hear that again, thanks?
Yes, no worries. This is advice from Ross Leo from Clarity Acoustics, and we provided this supplementary advice to council planners after the last council meeting, just because there was confusion. And we'd asked him that there were queries regarding the suitability of timber fencing and whether a timber fence can perform acoustically. To provide adequate noise attenuation, the construction material of an acoustic fence must have a minimum surface density of 12 kilograms per metre square and be free from holes and gaps. They provide a range of different materials which can achieve this, including 25 millimetre thick timber panelling. And they've provided a typical fence detail, but they say the installed timber fences achieve the minimum surface density of 12 kilograms per metre squared, however, include gaps and holes where palings have warped over time. It should be noted that providing fencing with a surface density of greater than 12 kilograms per metre squared will not result in any additional noise attenuation compared to the installed acoustic fences after the gaps are rectified.
Thank you. So that's pretty clear. The acoustic fence is in place and it's been repaired some time ago, you said.
Yes.
I'd also like to just drill back to your concern about proposed clause 22. You mentioned the desire to avoid having staff go out in the nighttime hours to move vehicles and so forth. Could you just expand on that a little bit? Because I think you were cut short and it's important that we understand.
I understand it's McDonald's practices that staff ideally don't leave the restaurant during nighttime hours, and the proposed condition requires, well, that at present, the southwestern car park gets closed off at 10 p.m. and this proposed additional condition seeking to have the entirety or the remaining western car spaces closed off at 1 a.m. So that would require staff, if they were parked in those westernmost car spaces, to come out and move their vehicles before then fencing off or bollarding off the affected spaces. And that just sort of becomes a bit tricky in terms of staff management during their shifts and when that happens.
So if we wanted to accommodate that approach, how would we modify the proposed clause 22? What would you seek to change?
I might go defer.
It might be easier if I answer the question, if I may. I watched the proceedings from the last council meeting and it appeared that there was a lot of conversation about the opening and closing of doors, starting and stopping of vehicles, noise of people coming into the car park, which is really quite close to the residents. I believe that the option to trade drive-through 24 hours actually helped remove that, despite the fact that vehicles are moving on and off the lot. The uniqueness of the lot, which has been identified here, is that the vehicles order at a particular point and they exit onto High Street. They don't sit in the car park. There's no motorcycles coming through drive-through. It's impractical to be collecting orders on a Harley Davidson. Cars, I can't stop my customers from talking to people on the telephone or from playing loud music. So now that is a new piece of information that I believe that we're contending with. I thought that if I was to offer drive-through operations 24 hours, that would actually get the customers in, get them off the lot, stop delivery drivers hanging around, stop drunk people hanging around in the car park, stop security issues. And I thought that it was a really neat solution for the community and for my neighbours. I still think that that's a really good solution. Putting bollards in my car park and having to go out and erect them at 1 a.m, I think is going to create more noise than it's worth. I'm not going to be able to always have everybody parked up on the eastern car park as they arrive for work. So it will entail them leaving the premises, getting in and out of their vehicles, moving their car, putting bollards that are stored somewhere, potentially in the corral, bringing out and dragging out a chain at 1 a.m. in the morning. I just didn't think that was a practical solution. The commitment is to get the cars on and off the lot. My target service time is 3 minutes. They come and they place an order and they exit.
Yeah. So effectively then what you'd be seeking is deletion of the clause 22 requirement entirely?
Yes.
Yeah.
The revised, the addition to that, I think we're comfortable with the remainder of the condition.
I wanted to trade 24 hours for the whole business. I do in all of my other McDonald's restaurants, as do 90 other McDonald's restaurants. However, I understand that the starting and stopping of vehicles, the parking seems to be a major concern.
Have you got a clear answer to that, Councillor Park? I'm not too sure.
I'm just wondering if, I mean, no is a short answer, but I'm not, it might need an officer comment to clarify. I mean, would clause 22 just fall away to achieve that? Is that?
Maybe, would you mind if we finish the questions and then maybe during the adjournment for council we...
That's fine. Yeah, I don't think I can take it further with the submitters.
Thanks very much. Councillor Franco.
Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Park have already asked the questions I was going to ask. No need.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bigger.
Well, yes, my question also relates to point 22, and I guess, can I just ask for clarification before we do then have the discussion? Were you proposing, Ms. Maloney, just now that that it's the additional phrase that was problematic, that you would still agree that it be closed between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. the following day and then stop there? Is that what you were suggesting?
Yes, so that first sentence would remain and the second...
And the rest of the paragraph
would be deleted.
Is your recommendation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, that's clarifying. So we would have only the first sentence and then stop it after the following day. That's my understanding.
Which we currently do. We currently close off the westernmost car park each evening at 10 p.m.
Yeah, I see, so it's no change to the...
There's no change to the operation, there's just not an additional requirement to install additional infrastructure and complete an additional task each day at 1 a.m.
So does that mean, this might be a question for officers, but basically that first sentence effectively should be in black? I mean, it's no change to what it currently would read.
It remains.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the fencing. And we've heard in your presentation that the current acoustic fence meets certain standards. But I guess what I'm seeking confirmation of, and let me make a comment before I seek confirmation. We've heard from the residents that that fencing makes no difference. So fencing useless, standards useless. There's a standard there that is making no difference whatsoever. So I guess what I'd like to understand is when you've said that you are willing to put in more acoustic, a different acoustic fence. Does that mean that you're willing to put in an acoustic fence that meets the standards, or an acoustic fence that will make a difference to the residents? And that may be two totally different things.
Just going off the advice from our acoustic engineer is that increasing the surface density is not going to make a difference. It will not result in any additional noise attenuation compared with what's there. So I'm sort of at a loss to figure out it can't be made better as far as we understand.
Yeah, and I'm not an acoustic engineer, and I will follow up this question with officers, but I guess the purposes of my question is there goodwill towards the residents that a solution to the problem will be sought, and not, well, we met this particular standard and, you know, that currently doesn't seem to be doing the job? I'm just asking for an expression of is that your intent and goodwill? I guess I'm addressing it to the owner.
I'm happy to provide additional solutions. I don't think that given that we currently meet the standard, I think that it'll be a bit of a blended approach in terms of what we actually do there, whether I can provide additional, whether I can double line it, whether I need to replace it, I'm not entirely sure. Without notice, we meet the building standard currently, so I just need to understand, are there additional treatments that I can install and complete? And I've already confirmed that I'm happy to complete the barrier around the MAC 90 refrigeration unit that currently runs on the roof, without question, meeting the density and having it certified.
Thank you.
Councillor Addis.
Thanks, Chair. I'm curious to get a sense of, and I know each place is probably unique, but do you have a sense of how many people per hour come overnight, and have you got any experience in, I mean, I'm sure you have experience, but have you any sense of how to keep people quiet or to slow down the traffic? Is there any way that you could give the locals some assurance that it might be able to be managed in a way that isn't quite as intrusive as they're thinking?
I think closing my dining room goes a long way towards not having patrons. I also listen to the proceedings about people walking up the street, drinking inebriated. When you contain people within their vehicles and you serve them quickly, it's the best possible chance for me to be able to both trade my business effectively and also keep people, bring customers on and off the lot. So I think trading the drive-through 24 hours addresses that. The original request was to trade the entire restaurant 24 hours, which I'm happy to concede doesn't seem to work for the community. So
you're saying you've already well, you're offering a significant concession on what you'd ideally like.
Feels like it's 40 to 50% of the business that I would be seeing otherwise, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We have two other questions from the table tonight. We're going to try and wrap these up before we close the meeting. So, Councillor Hollingsworth, if you could be brief, that'd be terrific.
I can, thank you, Mr. Chair. To you both, if you don't mind, and whoever would like to answer. So on the report, we have Table 7, predicted noise level at nearest affected receivers. We have, for example, number 14A, Packington, predicted noise 43, noise limit 43. It's already at the maximum allowable tolerance, and that's before the operations, if this was supported by council, would continue into the 24/7. What I'm asking, and following on from Councillor Watson's question, is clearly the acoustic fence at the minimum standard is not working. You've heard the presenters tonight. They're implying that they will...
Chair, point of order. This isn't a question. These are assertions, and this is just not appropriate.
Have you got a question, Councillor Hollingsworth?
Thank you. They're implying sleep deprivation. So what I'm asking you is for council to make a decision this evening where we feel that some of the significant concerns have been addressed, while we go into a break, if you will consider that. Thank you.
Okay, we might just leave that. Councillor Franco?
Just to be very brief, you've said two things, and I just want to confirm. One, the acoustic fence currently meets the relevant code, and B, no further noise attenuation is possible with a different fence treatment there. It's simply not possible to have further noise attenuation. Are you serious? Is that your point?
That is the advice from our acoustic engineer, that I understand it. Increasing the surface density beyond the 12 kilograms per metre squared will not result in any additional noise attenuation.
My further question is probably facetious, but you appreciate that it's difficult for me as an elected councillor to take that seriously. Anyway, thank you.
Point of order, Chair.
Absolutely.
I'm more than happy for an acoustic engineer to offer additional solutions to the same problem. It might not be specifically the fence. It might be double lining the fence. It might be something else. I think the point of the acoustic report was to demonstrate that it met specification. If there's more that we can do, I'll do it. I'm not deliberately trying not to give my neighbours the peace and quiet that they would like to enjoy. I'm more than happy to invest in the facility to be able to create this. Up until I made an application to trade 24 hours, it hadn't been brought up to me. Okay. I'd owned the operation for 6 months prior to that. I've owned it for nearly 12 months now. This is the first time that we've had the debate on the acoustic fence.
Thank you. The ward councillor has a question. Councillor Stavro, is it reasonably brief? You have spoken before.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I won't take too long. I just wanted to add to the comment on the acoustic because it will be brief. Look, the acoustic issue is probably the major issue, as I understand from the...
This is going to comments, Councillor Stavro. Have you got a distinct question you can ask?
I do. Thank you. Look, are you prepared to solve the problem of noise production via the driveway rather than providing responses as to the density of the fence? Because the density of the fence is a specific solution.
Chair, I've raised yet another point of order. This is procedurally unfair. The submitter has sought expert advice and provided that expert advice to council. The whole premise of this question is offensive and unfair.
I hear your comment, Councillor Stavro. We might wrap it up there and we'll let the officers address it in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gold.
Thank you. For the gallery, I'll have to explain, we have scheduled a council meeting at 7:30. As you referral to your watch, you'll see we've passed that time. We've used up the spare time. So what we now have to do is go through a process of closing this meeting and then adjourning and then commencing it again. So if you just bear with us, that would be appreciated. So I'm looking to the councillors for a motion proposing the adjournment of this meeting.
So moved, Chair.
And Councillor Addis, do you second that? Thank you very much. All of those in support? The meeting is adjourned. Proposing to resume the meeting. Can I have a motion to that? Good to go. Okay. Can I have a motion to resume the meeting? I've got a few. Councillor Park.
So moved, Chair.
A seconder? Councillor Hollingsworth.
So second, thank you.
Thank you very much. All those in support? The meeting is resumed. Now, we've been through questions. I'm not proposing to go back to any there at all. So the next step, I will return to the officers for matters arising. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm able to address the concerns raised in the submissions. In particular, the concerns raised in regards to amenity concerns of noise. Existing planning permit conditions manage amenity impacts and limit the disruption to the amenity of the neighbourhood. A new condition has also been included to provide a site management plan to further manage amenity impacts. In addition, Council has also recommended the closure of the entire Western Interface car park to assist in mitigating noise nuisance from patrons accessing the site. In relation to the concerns raised about the acoustic fence and air conditioning unit, the recommended planning permit audit of the fence will confirm if the current repairs to the fence are satisfactory, and conditions will also require acoustic screening to the refrigeration unit. These conditions are to ensure noise emissions are within EPA guidelines. Thank you.
Councillors, are there any questions of the officers? Councillor Biggar.
Yes, and I apologise in advance that my question does have to do with acoustics, but just I suppose for clarification, can I ask officers to explain what we mean when we say an acoustic fence in this context? Because I just have to say that for me, I think of the Eastern Freeway acoustic fence and it doesn't look like a wooden paling fence. So if you could explain the difference in the context of this, I think that would be quite helpful.
Thanks, Chair. It's interesting when we refer to that term acoustic fence, and really what that is saying is that it's a type of fence that performs a certain level of acoustic quality. So that could be any variety of type of fence. Now, we commonly refer to those large fences along freeways or in those sorts of locations as acoustic fences because they perform that sort of acoustic level. They're designed for that purpose of minimising that noise. In this case, we've got an existing fence. Yes, it is a paling fence, but it is a larger, more substantial fence than your standard boundary paling fence. And what the report that has been submitted with the application by the applicant has demonstrated and indicated is that it is a fence that performs an acoustic quality restriction that minimises the impact of noise to the relevant standards for that location. Now, what we have said in our proposed conditions is that further testing will be required by the applicant, should the permit be granted, that requires additional testing to demonstrate to Council that the relevant EPA standards for acoustic qualities is met. Now, that might mean that the fence needs additional changes to it if it does not meet the relevant standards when further tested, and that is provided to Council.
So, if I might, so then just to clarify what you're saying, is that the acoustic standard, it's meeting an acoustic standard for a particular location and a particular amount of noise. So if it's because it's not a fence like the one on the Eastern Freeway, that's saying to me then that the noise that has been measured to be emitted in this place is presumably much lower than the noise we might get at next to a freeway, and that's why it meets that?
That's right. Through yourself, Chair, absolutely, that's right. Given that the existing fence, as indicated by the reports, meets those relevant standards, that suggests that the noise impacts and noise levels are very, very low compared to an Eastern Freeway situation. Absolutely, it's demonstrating that or indicates that to us. Remember, with these sorts of fences and these sorts of situations, we're not dealing with the incidence of an individual situation of a loud truck or a backfire or some individual peak noise situations. We're dealing with the standard average acoustic levels.
Just if I might, just on my last one, then to clarify this, one more, is presumably there was a certain standard up to, I don't know, say 10 p.m. at night. And then presumably, is there a higher standard? I know that we don't set these are state standards, but would the EPA have a higher standard for noise, acceptable noise at say 3 a.m. versus 7 p.m.?
Again, through yourself, the simple answer to that is yes, it's relative to the situation at that time. So the answer is yes.
So that means that the standard that we're looking at right now we will ensure that, at the very least, we will ensure that the fence meets the standard for, the worst possible time for 3 a.m. or whatever it is, between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. and that standard will be the highest.
We will make sure that it meets a relevant standard for that overnight condition. And in this situation, this is a situation where it would be pertinent for us to seek our own peer review of the acoustic report that is provided under the condition.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to officers, I'm wondering, from the basis that I don't want to set this applicant up for something that's not achievable, would testing to EPA standards require somebody with a noise measuring device to be in a habitable room of an adjoining dwelling that the applicant cannot control access to?
Through you, Chair, it's possible that access will be required to those properties to perform that testing.
Thank you. And a follow-up, are officers able to come up with an appropriate clause then, or wording, that allows it to ensures that it is achievable by the applicant to attain that test and report?
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Chair. The way the condition is structured is that this information needs to be provided to our satisfaction before the 24/7 use commences. So the important thing there is that the use cannot be undertaken and until that activity is undertaken to our satisfaction.
So, Chair, if the applicant is unable to get that report because the applicant is unable to facilitate access into those residential dwellings and the neighbours prohibit access into those residential dwellings, then that report will never be forthcoming and 24-hour operation will never occur.
Through your Chair, that could force consideration of alternatives, and I think it would be pertinent to understand what those options are before jumping to a conclusion.
So, Chair, can officers point me in the direction of the clause that requires this standard to be, to this report to be provided, so that I can consider how it might be reworked or eliminated?
Condition 27 in the report outlines that proposed amended condition.
Thank you. I've got another question down a different rabbit hole, if I may, and that's seeking officers' advice as to what appeal rights the applicant might have should this be refused this evening.
Through you, Chair, the applicant would have an opportunity to appeal conditions, and I believe that would be a 60-day timeframe for them to make a decision on whether they exercise those rights.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stavro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I have only 2 to 3 questions for the officers, and it does relate to the acoustics. Some of my questions have been answered by the questions that Councillor Vigor asked. Now, first question, are there well-defined standards for setting up such acoustic tests so that we can actually reliably say that, you know, provided the test is done, we're comfortable that we meet the standard?
Through you, Chair, the test would need to be undertaken by an appropriately qualified acoustic engineer. There would certainly have standards that they apply in undertaking their noise sampling.
May I follow up as a clarifier, because I'm not entirely comfortable. I understand the response. So that's to do with the sampling. What I'm concerned is, and perhaps Councillor Sinfield touched upon it, and not the restriction. I'm hoping that there are well-defined standards that one does not need to go into people's homes, but there are standards that are acceptable, not in sampling, but in the way such a monitoring and reporting is done, so that we can say that piece of work follows a particular pattern that's well recognised, and depending on the results, we can actually be comfortable that the outcome has been met.
Through yourself, Chair, the simple answer is yes, there are protocols that are set by the EPA in terms of measuring the noise impacts, and there is a process for undertaking those measures with a suitable acoustic engineer. It will relate back to the circumstances at the individual location, what surrounding noise are. So there is some exercise of judgment in applying those protocols, and that's where perhaps in this sort of situation, whilst there would be an acoustic engineer that provides advice and demonstrates that it meets those protocols and that those suitable tests have been done, that we would seek some input and some independent peer review of that advice to ensure that we're comfortable that it's met those relevant standards and protocols.
Okay.
Thank
you for that.
If I can ask a clarifying question from the Chair. I think I heard it from the last 2 questions. Should the residents in the area refuse access to their property, can the tests still be completed? Can they be extrapolated as if access has been gained?
Yes, and that's where we would need to exercise our judgment with the input of a relevant advisor, an acoustic advisor. Judgment would need to be made having regard to testing at the boundaries or near the boundaries if access to the individual properties was not able to be provided.
Councillor Stavro, you had a couple of other questions.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Councillor Gold. You clarify sort of well suited as well. Just the follow up there, Mr. Walker. So would I be right in assuming then that there will be a report commissioned by the applicant, and then there will be an independent expert that will set up on their own initiative their own way of assessing the same thing, and on the basis of that, you will be able to make a decision, or the relevant authority will be able to make a decision as to the satisfaction that it passes the standard of the EPA. Is that what you're saying?
To yourself, Chair, no, not quite saying that. What I'm saying is that given the complexity of these sorts of matters, the conditions of the proposed permit include testing to the relevant EPA standards, and an acoustic engineer would need to provide that report. Now, what we're saying is that in this situation, we would be seeking some peer review of that to make sure that we're not missing anything in terms of ensuring that it's met those relevant protocols and standards. So we're not sending someone out to go and do the testing again and do all the work out on site. What we're saying is that we'll get someone to peer review the work that's been provided by the applicant's acoustic engineer.
Fair enough. And that does answer the question. I understand that the process will be peer reviewed, not the actual outcome of the process and the results that they get. The follow-up then, Mr. Walker, is then, look, on the existing acoustic report, if I were to, just maybe you need to explain it to me because I may have got it wrong, is 65 decibels the threshold for sleep noises that above that it would actually make somebody disturb their sleep?
Mr. Chairman, I just wonder if I can make a comment while Mr. Walker is speaking with the staff. Just to make the observation that when you've got a state standard in relation to noise emissions from a site, Council's not able to apply a permit condition or expectations which will take an applicant beyond that standard. So at the end of the day, a condition which requires an applicant to submit a report prepared by a properly qualified consultant to demonstrate compliance with that standard or measures which need to be taken to achieve compliance is all that Council can actually impose. So the obligation on Council is to decide whether it wants that acoustic report in the first place, and once it does, it then is reliant upon that report being submitted in accordance with the appropriate assessment standards to demonstrate compliance with the EPA requirement. That's as far as Council can go.
Councillor Stavro, I think what's being said is we should be able to rely on an imposed standard rather than looking at the details of figures tonight.
I am comfortable with that. That was not the purpose of my question, but if the officers don't want to answer that, I've got a couple of I've got one more or two more perhaps, depending on the responses to that.
Briefly, if you would, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. Mr. Walker, if obviously the history of this, it was built a while ago, and the planning was achieved in a particular way, given that there were going to be limited hours. The argument put to us as councillors is that if a convenience restaurant were to be operating in the same place now, they wouldn't require any permit for the extended hours of operation. But the question I have, and this is where I'm not clear on, is that if such an application were to come for a new restaurant, would the planning considerations perhaps lead to a different design so that the drive-through is not exactly where it is placed, given the such close proximity of the community to the commercial one zone?
Through yourself, Chair, there's probably a couple of different answers to that question. We have a situation where the land use now has a different permit trigger in the particular zone. So the land use does not require a planning permit in the zone. And if this was a new use, then there cannot be restrictions on the hours of operation imposed on the use. So that means, for example, if this McDonald's was to vacate this building, leave for a period of time so that the permit that's already in place lapses, and they move back into the building after the 2-year lapse period, as it is now, then we could not control the use of that land or control a 24-hour activity. So that would not change the way that the drive-through operates or the car park operates or any of those other things. If, however, this was a new development that involved a McDonald's with 24 hours, there might be some judgment made around the buildings and works, despite the use not having a matter that we could control or being able to control the direct hours through the use, there still might be a judgment made around the buildings and works that associates with that proposal in terms of its relationship with adjoining and nearby properties. And it might be the position of the drive-through or acoustic fencing and other sorts of landscaping and the like that associate with the buildings and works. So there's perhaps a couple of different answers depending on the different scenarios. Very difficult question to answer.
Councillor Stavro.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the indulgence.
You've completed your questions?
I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like some clarification in relation to the testing. In undertaking testing to meet the EPA standards, is it the case that intermittent noise, say the noise that might occur from a car having its window wound down and playing excessively loud music, wouldn't be part of something that's captured by the EPA testing? And similarly, perhaps the occasional loud group of patrons who might have gone outside, or someone talking on their phone, as opposed to, say, the day-to-day or night-to-night, whatever the expression might be, conventional operations of the McDonald's. And I ask this because I suspect what the residents are concerned about is the and I'm not sure, but I don't, from what I've heard, it might be the intermittent, occasional noise rather than the continual noise of someone being outside their premise that's waking them up. So I wonder if you can comment on that.
Again, through yourself, Chair, and I would just stress that officers within the planning department are not involved in assessing or undertaking acoustic assessments. This is not an area of our expertise. This is why we have acoustic engineers and others. We do have a health department that has some involvement in noise matters, and we provide...
Thank you, yes. Look, I appreciate I'm asking you a question that's not your...
What I do understand is that when these measures are undertaken, they do look at all of the noise activities on the site. So that will look at the plant and equipment, the customer activities, the noise and emissions from the cars and the vehicles, the talking and discussions and radios and banging of doors. All of that comes into the collective noise that's produced on a site such as this. And yes, that will come into the measurements. What it won't do, however, is address or deal with when the acoustic fencing is put in place to meet the relevant standards. It won't deal with the occasional peak blip in noise. It might happen every couple of weeks. It might be a very loud Harley Davidson, or it might be someone that turns their radio up to an excessive sound. You know, one of those cars with the bumping subwoofers or whatever that comes out of them. It won't deal with the very occasional situation that might arise. It won't deal with that absolute peak in those situations. But that's how all these sorts of measures and standards work.
Councillor Franco, does that give you the answer you're seeking?
Yes, it does. So I suppose it might be reasonable to assume that that sort of intermittent noise that I might experience on the occasional weekend outside of my own home might happen more often in a location like High Street with a commercial event, in a location, in a commercial centre like High Street with a 24-hour operating restaurant. But that's not, those occasional blips are not what are being picked up.
Is that a
question? Oh, that's a repeat, really. So, and there's no, and my second part, the second question has already been answered by the Chief Executive Officer, who explained that we can't go beyond the EPA standards, but there is no way of really picking that up for us as representatives sitting here in judgment to try and accommodate that extra additional imposition that goes beyond our role. That's correct.
Councillor Frank, there was no real question.
Well, that was a question. Read it with a question mark on the end.
Officers,
I'm looking for a response. I am expecting a response.
All right, we might move on. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if officers can help me understand what happens when residents keep noise diaries. I understand that when there is a noise problem, that we advise to do that. But what's the process and what's the outcome? Because quite obviously, noise from the site is not a new issue. Could you help me understand what happens there?
Thanks, and through yourself, Chair. This is a slightly different approach to noise issues, and there is the ability and provisions within the health team to deal with noise as a nuisance. And nuisance matters can arise from many, many different things, and noise is just one of those. The threshold for demonstrating a nuisance by noise is quite high. It would need to be very, very consistent loud noises over an extended period of time, and that's where the noise diaries come into play. The health department looks towards those as one piece of information and evidence to demonstrate a nuisance where that might occur, and that's then using the relevant health legislation. It's not turning its mind to amenity conditions like this under a planning permit. It's going to a different approach, and that might occur where there is any activity that's causing a nuisance.
Thank you. Follow-up question, if I may. So what action have we taken? Obviously, residents have been keeping noise diaries, and I'm guessing they've submitted the noise diary. What's been our response? I guess what the question I'm going to be leading to is, have we taken measurements ourselves on either side to understand what the noise is like on their side of the fence? And is the noise attenuation fence making a difference?
In fairness, again, to the applicants, this is all presupposing that there's been complaints, and frankly, whether there have or haven't been, I'm not sure how that could be relevant to this application tonight.
Could I also add to that, we've reversed back, there is a standard they've got to meet, regardless of what measurements have been taken or not taken. There's a standard that needs to be met under the conditions of what's been proposed by the officers tonight. So I'm not too sure if the question is totally relevant. If you wouldn't, are you happy to move on?
I'll conclude my questions there, but I do feel that the question that I asked was relevant and important.
Okay. Councillor Stavro, your light's on again. Do you have a further question? If you can keep it fairly brief, it'd be great.
I really appreciate that opportunity, Councillor Gold, but given the importance for the community and for the applicant, I need to ask this question to Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, just in terms of giving clarity to us as councillors, if a motion of refusal were to be put, is that open to us as councillors, or we would be in clear-cut violation, or there are areas within the appropriate standards that would allow us that opportunity to do so?
Thanks for yourself, Chair. I might keep my answer very brief here, and I think I addressed this in the previous meeting. The application before you is to amend an existing permit. The applicant cannot operate 24 hours unless they amend this permit. So it is legally open to you to form a view based on the information before you that you do not wish to support this application. So it is legally open to you to refuse the application to amend the permit to operate 24 hours because the applicant needs that change to operate 24 hours. However, that decision in many ways is a technical matter when you have regard to the change in the circumstances for this type of land use and the way it's referred to in the commercial 1 zone, which now applies to this land. And any other use that wishes to establish can establish without the need for a permit 24 hours. So that context will be the context that if this matter is refused by council and is considered at VCAT, that context will be taken on board and carefully scrutinised and considered by VCAT. So you are legally able to make a decision to refuse, but it's in a different context to the circumstances when the permit with the restrictions was first issued.
Councillor Stavro, are you happy with that response?
I might sort of ask a follow-up as a clarifier. So what you're saying, Mr. Walker, is that technically we're able to refuse this, but if, and it goes back to the question I asked before, if a new operation was fronting up today with an application, would they, just to clarify it for me, would they would be granted 24/7 operation, but not necessarily the driveway where it is? But is that not open to us and to the reviewer, whoever that may be?
Again, through yourself, Chair, that may well form part of the grounds of any refusal. The relationship of the drive-through to the adjoining properties and the amenity impacts associated with the 24-hour operation, they would be some of the grounds that may well be referred to and may well be considered if council was to refuse this application. Now, that's not the same as saying that that is a ground which has strength at VCAT, but they would be the sorts of matters that would be referred to and provided in arguing against the 24-hour operation.
Councillor Stavro, where do you stand?
I foreshadow a motion then.
We have a first. Thanks, Councillor Stavro. Councillor Addis.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one to officers. If this ended up at VCAT, these conditions could be lost, couldn't they? That's my question.
Again, through yourself, Chair, yes, some of these conditions could be lost. We've got an interesting situation in that this proposal has evolved a little bit. There was an application that was first submitted. There was then a consultation meeting and a further change submitted by the applicant. So that further change after that first consultation meeting is actually what is subject to a VCAT appeal if we were in that forum, potentially, because that's actually the formal proposal by the applicant. There was then the previous UPDC meeting in which the applicant has made offers around conditions that they would be prepared to accept, but that didn't formally form part of an amended proposal. So if the applicant feels that they are unable to accept those conditions in the context of additional conditions recommended by officers or any further conditions again imposed by council, then it reverts back to the amended proposal at that first step after the first consultation meeting. Now, I know that's quite complex. We've actually got essentially 5 different steps here, and we go back to step 2, potentially as the debatable or arguable position that the applicant might take at VCAT.
Just to follow up, so some of the offers would have been made without prejudice and couldn't be enforced,
Correct.
if you like? Thank you.
All right, well, that seems to have exhausted the questions of officers. Councillor Stavro, you've foreshadowed a motion. Would you now like to put that?
Thank you, Councillor Gold. Look, I'm not sure whether my colleagues are going to follow me on this, but I would like to test the refusal motion prepared earlier.
We have one on the screen. Okay. There is a refusal motion on the screen. I'm now seeking to see if we have a seconder for this refusal motion. We have from Councillor Watson. Right. Are there any opposition to this motion as currently put? There is. Okay. We'll now move into debate. Councillor Stavro, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Councillor Gold, and through you. Let me first thank the officers for the work and the support on this project. There's obviously a lot of work goes into this, as we've seen, and also the presenters for their presentations and civility throughout the process. Now, having spoken to my community as the representative, I do believe that this application should be refused by us tonight. The 24/7 proposal before us, despite the concessions, and we have seen not quite clear the extent of which concessions we have, I don't think it's suitable, having extensively spoken with my community, for our community at this point in time. The community's apprehensions, they are centred around potential major disruption to their lives, sudden noises, late night activities, and they're underscored by a fundamental right. That's the right to peace and tranquility within one's own home. It is unique where this location of this McDonald's is. Let me be unequivocal though. My opposition does not arise from a rejection of the progress or the vitality of our commercial zones. On the contrary, I do share our collective aspiration for flourishing business districts that enrich our community and give it more life. That's a great ambition, and I support that. However, as stewards of our neighbourhoods, it is our responsibility to ensure that development does align with the unique character and needs of our residents, in spirit and in the letter, particularly in the spirit. And let's not forget that this initial permit with the drive-through, where it is right now, was under the assumption of time restrictions. It had the same acoustic fence, and yet it's not enough. It has not been enough, but it wasn't operating 24/7. Now, despite us in council putting efforts to understand, to meet our community's needs, we find sometimes constrained by statewide regulations, and that may perhaps be what this hinges on, and that we fail or we're not able to accommodate the diverse nuances of different municipalities, particularly our own, in particular situations like this. And it is a sobering reality that a uniform approach often fails to strike the appropriate balance between business interests and residential tranquility. And tonight we see a stark conflict in front of us. However, I'm going to repeat, little of substance on the structure of our community has changed or this site since the previous rejection of a similar application, where the potential adverse impacts of 24/7 were rightfully acknowledged and very clear. The only significant change that I could see is the initial granting of the planning, since the initial granting of the planning permit and the refusal, is that the rezoning to commercial 1 has been achieved. And we are told that if a new convenience restaurant sought to commence operations on this site, no planning permission would be required for the use of the land, and there would be no ability to restrict the operating hours. However, the planning permit, and particularly the drive-through, were approved based on restricted hours of operation. So while it's true that a new application may not have operating hour restrictions, it might also be required to have a different design from the current one. Particularly the drive-through would not be in that location, or potentially there would not be a drive-through at all, which means that the business case and residents are going to be winners in that situation. Now, the residents, I believe, understand the risks of going to VCAT in having had discussions with them, and Mr. Walker articulated that clearly. But the reality is that it is highly probable that a 24/7 drive-through will primarily benefit known local traffic, and therefore the community will not be better off. And I think that would not be a good outcome for the community. This situation, I might say, underscores the urgent need to also empower local governments to make decisions that authentically reflect the unique character and the needs where they occur in our community. And I do implore not only the state government, but all political parties to heed this call, because this is an important thing. And this particular application brings it to a crux. That I don't believe if we were to be deciding it on the basis of what our community needs, it would have been a much more clearer case.
Councillor Stavro, I'll have to get you to start to wrap up now, please. Thank
I'm
you.
about to finish, Chair. So I would make my conclusion and urge my fellow councillors to refuse this application, because we've heard the arguments and we really understand that the community will be affected because of where the particular site is and the particular large increase, if 25% to 50% increase in more employees would mean that it would be a large increase.
Councillor Stavro, you need to wrap up now. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Watson, do you want to take the opportunity to speak now or wait?
I'm happy to speak now. For me, I think the core issue of this particular matter before us tonight is about amenity impacts. And while I well understand that we can't ask an applicant to do any more than the standards require of them, what has not been demonstrated in my mind is that the standards that exist actually achieve the outcome that are sought by the standards. So the amenity impact is going to be very high on the residents that live there. So we've heard, I ask questions about these noise diaries, and then there's health provisions, but we don't seem to have any outcome from there. We got EPA controls, but that doesn't seem to be able to be applied so that a solution can be found that is tolerable to the residents. Now, I won't go over some of the things that Councillor Stavros talked about with, if this was a new site and so on and so forth. And I'm very aware that you can't essentially try this as a new application. McDonald's is there, they have been there for many years as a contributing member of our commercial community. What I'm not satisfied with tonight is that the amenity impacts of and the solutions that have been proposed are actually going to achieve an outcome that will be satisfactory to the residents. And I do applaud the owner of McDonald's, who said that he had a goodwill and wanted to be able to work with his neighbours. And should this motion fail tonight and a motion to grant the permit be considered, that encourage him to work with the residents in that spirit of goodwill to try and come up with a solution that works. So I'll leave my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Are there any other comments? Councillor Park.
Thank you, Chair. I might pick up where Councillor Watson left off and note that my understanding is that Mr Burchard actually gave his personal mobile phone number to affected residents and has bent over backwards to assist in that process. And I know some of the objectors have whipped themselves up into a McFlurry, but at the end of the day, it may well be that the best outcome for residents is actually approval of this application, because if this matter goes to VCAT, as Councillor Addis questioned, the outcome in terms of conditions may well be much less than is currently there, and not at all to the liking of nearby residents. So it seems to me, in any event, that there's no proper basis for this refusal, and I'd urge my colleagues to vote against it. And finally, Chair, I foreshadow a motion in the event that this one fails.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Addis.
Just briefly, look, I think I won't support this. I think there's no doubt that the residents aren't going to be happy with this outcome, and we hear and I think understand and have concern with what they're saying, but it seems that the planning legislation, which we effectively administer, very often have no say in, sadly actually often produces outcomes like these, and that's just the reality that we live in. We've heard what I believe is goodwill from the applicant, a willingness to try to assist where possible, and I think that is very encouraging. I'm concerned that should this go to VCAT, which if we refuse it, no doubt it will, these residents will be potentially worse off than we might be able to achieve for them in this chamber. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I understand the concerns of residents, I really do, and I echo many of the comments made by Councillor Addis and that too of Councillor Park. But in following what was mentioned by Councillor Watson, we're not here to debate the state's Environment Protection Act tonight. Those standards are set, and it's beyond our powers to change them. There's advocacy that we can do, but that is a separate issue. We need to hear the concerns of residents tonight and to manage their expectations if this goes to appeal at VCAT. And as has already been mentioned, all of these conditions and the goodwill by the proprietor that has come to the table could very well be lost. So the noise attenuation and the fence issue, as far as I'm concerned, has been achieved. That report has been provided by a qualified sound engineer, and I'm not going to question the provision of that report. Clause 22, the car park enclosure, currently exists 2 a.m. to 5 a.m, and I question whether the modification that is in the current motion on the screen is achievable, because I wouldn't want to be sending a 14 or 15-year-old kid at midnight out into the car park to move people on and put up bollards. I don't think that's achievable or reasonable. The EPA noise standards we've debated, and the current standard as far as planning permit is concerned, explained by Mr Walker, if a new permit was issued in the Q Junction Activity Centre, was in fact applied for today, it would not require a permit, and that use would be permitted. So I appreciate the residents' concerns, but I also appreciate the positive impact to the local economy that a 24-hour venue like this will make, and the provision of jobs to our local community. So I think it's unreasonable to refuse this tonight, regardless of how much we like it or dislike the proposal that's on the table. So I can't support the refusal motion this evening.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm struggling to support the original motion, and I'm leaning towards supporting Councillor Stavrou's motion of refusal, mainly because I know the matter of the acoustic impacts of the adjoining properties was debated quite comprehensively when this last came to the chamber on the 15th of April. The issue has been known for some time. It was implied that the repairs would be done to the fencing to address the acoustic issues, but we found out tonight those repairs have been done, and sadly it's made no difference. So I understand technically the application is supported by officers because it complies with the control with regard to the acoustic protection, but we've heard from residents impacted that they are already struggling with this current condition. Sleep deprivation is only going to get worse as 24 hours is granted, and there's already one resident at capacity of the tolerable level. So I cannot support this. The only way I could support it was with an improved acoustic fence was constructed to meet a higher standard, not a minimum standard. Thank you.
Councillor Gillies.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, although a wooden acoustic fence may be acceptable in regulations, it appears not in reality. This is very sad. I can understand the owner suggesting that a drive-through is better than blocking off the driveway, and the point's been raised about employees being out there in the very early hours of the morning moving chains and bollards, and I think that that's something that we shouldn't ignore either when we're talking about noises. We have heard the owner say that he would be prepared. He's assured us that he'd be prepared to follow through on the acoustic needs of this site from a resident's perspective, something I know we can't impose on him, but he has said that in a public forum. So, you know, we should show an element of trust there too. I'm very sympathetic to the residents' concerns, and some of them are anticipations, and this is why I'm struggling with this one. But at the end of the day, I'm afraid we find ourselves in an indefensible position to challenge a refusal. The officers have talked to us about including a peer review. Condition 27 was quite significant in addressing some of these matters of that report, and there is probably a high risk of losing things that have been moved forward and are probably improvements than the alternative. So for that, I can't support a refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Stavro, I'll now return to you to wrap up debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. Look, I think colleagues have all brought very good points, even those that are opposing the refusal. I will start, I think Councillor Watson really nailed it. It is really about amenity, but it is the amenity of what is going to happen to those residents when sudden cars in the middle of the night will just rev that engine or slam that door and wake them up again and again and again. It will happen because, as we've heard, the number of employees the applicant is proposing is quite large, indicating there's an expectation of a huge amount of activity. It just stands to reason. It's common sense. It's not acoustic engineering that with such increase in activity, the amount of inconvenience, to say the least, that we've heard is going to be ratcheted up. And I think what we're doing now, if we were to support it, is we are actually allowing potentially a technicality make us think that this will actually be lost in VCAT. I don't believe it will lost in VCAT because there is a human element here. It is a strong human element here, and it's the right to sleep and the amount of the inconvenience that this will do to the people around the area. I'm not opposed to other areas having the same treatment, but where it is going to cause harm. And I do ask of you, colleagues, to reconsider your thoughts around that, because I do believe that losing it to VCAT is not going to be a fait accompli. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Staver. We've now exhausted debate, and I'm now proposing to put the motion. The motion on the screen has been altered slightly to remove the word council and insert the name of this committee, but I believe that's the only change to what was put originally. So that is the motion. I presume there's no objection to that. It's just a simple correction. So if I could ask for those in favour of the motion on the screen, please raise your hands now. Those opposed? That motion is lost. We'll now turn to you, Councillor Park. You were proposing an alternative motion.
Thank you, Chair. It'll be based on the officer's recommendation, but with a couple of minor changes. If we go to clause 22, so the motion will not include the text in red, save for the number 22. And if we go to clause 1, I think it was.
Before we leave that, Councillor Park.
Yep.
Just through yourself, Chair, if Councillor Park might want to consider including the words at the end, back at clause 22, at the end of the following day, including the words to the satisfaction of the responsible authority.
That's fine. Happy to incorporate those words. No pressure. That's fine. And clause 1 was missing the word a somewhere. 7 days, a week. So line 2. And I think there's nothing else. I think that was all that. So that's my motion, Chair.
Thanks very much.
Through yourself, Chair, there's just one other item from consistency point of view. With the change to condition 22, there'll also need to be a corresponding change to condition 26H, which will need to be deleted because that also references the closure of the car park.
Delete 26H and renumber the, yep. So that is now my motion.
Fantastic. So, Councillor, were you ready to speak to your motion now? Oh, sorry, a seconder. We did, even for Councillor Park. Oh, well, okay. Do we have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Watson. Councillor Sinfield.
The other Councillor Watson.
All right. Now, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes,
Councillor
thank
Park?
you, Chair. Look, I'll be...
No, I'm opposing the motion.
Yeah, we took that as read.
Yeah.
It wasn't said.
I will be very brief, Chair, so that we don't necessarily have two sets of debates on the same issue. I think the special source required here is common sense. I just want to note, though, that sometimes in pursuit of an outcome, it's, you know, I mean, there's no Ferraris going through, revving their engines at 3 a.m. in this drive-through. Having driven a Ferrari for 13 years, I can tell you that it's not a place you want to go because it's unforgiving on the rims of one's wheels. So it was suggested to us that there's no McDonald's with this sort of arrangement anywhere within Cooey, but in fact the McDonald's at Baldwin is a very similar setup with residents on Weir Street in very close proximity. So that's one example that comes to mind immediately. This is otherwise a very routine application for amendment. It's one that ought to be approved, and it's one that if it ever finds its way to VCAT will certainly be approved. There was much debate about the acoustic fence, and I think that had its genesis in the fact that many didn't understand what an acoustic fence is, and the fact that it can indeed be a timber fence that meets certain requirements. There's no magic in that. And it's been in place for something like 30 years. Wasn't as well maintained as it ought to have been, but to me that says that there probably were no noise complaints, because if there were, council officers would have gone out surely and inspected and would have found the defects in the fence and taken the appropriate action. So I think all the discussion about noise around the table was really just that, noise. There are remedies in place if the establishment doesn't meet the requirements, then there's recourse both to the EPA and to council, and that's the appropriate governing mechanism. So I urge my colleagues to support the motion.
Councillor Sinfield, do you want to speak at this point in time or hold your comment till later? Wait.
I'll wait, thank you.
Do other councillors want to speak at this point in time?
Yes.
Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Chair. As I haven't spoken, I think I'll speak now. I agree with the points Councillor Park has made, and that's why I'll be supporting the motion that's up before us. But I do empathise with the situation that the residents find themselves in. Just as a reflection, I mean, where I live, you know, I get the occasional party once a month or once every 2 months. There's noise, there's something unusual that's not going to be regulated by the EPA, and that, you know, as a person that most of us experience, I'll live through that and that disruption. But I recognise that there will be perhaps more disruption in a location in which the residents here are living, and that perhaps those disruptions won't be, sometimes where they're intermittent, won't be addressed by the EPA guidelines. But I think that's outside of council's responsibility, and it's not something we can do something. So, but I do appeal to McDonald's to work collaboratively as a good neighbour. I hope they will be, and I think that's simply a matter, you know, where there are opportunities to perhaps do something a little bit more than that required by the standard. I hope they will consider that and be a good neighbour. And equally, and I know it's difficult for the residents that might live nearby, but to try to reach out in a spirit of goodwill to your neighbour and work cooperatively, because you can achieve more sometimes by such a strategy, particularly where there are issues that are outside the control of the elected council. So I'm going to vote the way I am, because I think some of the concerns are beyond our limit. Thank you.
There doesn't appear to be. Councillor Stavro. Your audio.
Thank you, Councillor Golds.
Thank you.
Look, I'm not going to harp on it at length on this. My opinions have been heard. I'm opposed to this because I think I don't believe we are correct that there is no chance that this is going to win in VCAT. I think that I believe that Mr. Walker expressed that there are ways to argue this at VCAT, and given the amenity change that is potentially is going to occur in our community, and I don't only mean only those in the immediate neighbourhood, the whole neighbourhood will be affected by it. We ought to support that, at least give the community another chance to provide the argument in an independent body. But look, I live in a ward where sometimes there is a lot of unruly activity on the boulevard, and they're not all Ferraris and Lamborghinis. Many other cars can make the noises that a Ferrari and Lamborghini can. And I tell you what, you find these cars with leaving McDonald's wrappers there on the street. So they do go there. And if they are doing that kind of thing in the middle of the night, that would be one of the customs. I believe, as I've heard from the community, that the late night custom will be different. And that's where we should have focused on the amenity and the fact that whilst the letter of the law may be according to how Councillor Park has expressed it, I believe there is an opportunity here because there is a grey zone as to what this would mean for the community in this area. I'm going to leave it at that, and I'll vote against it.
Thank you, Councillor Stavro. There doesn't now to appear to be any other debate. We'll return to you, Councillor Sinfield, for your comments.
Thank you, Chair. The residents have absolutely been heard tonight, so don't feel as though you haven't been heard. We're just going about this in a different way, and it appears that the majority of us around the table tonight feel that you will end up with a better result with the conditions that are listed on the screen, being able to decide this matter tonight rather than letting it be determined by VCAT. I'm confident that the applicant will keep his commitment to be a good neighbour. There are mechanisms available to hold the applicant to these conditions, and should the residents be aware that the conditions are not being met, then they need to notify council so that we can act upon that. I absolutely understand what Councillor Stavro is seeking tonight and his commitment to represent the community. But as I said, we just come to this from different directions. I'm also confident that the local police will help by patrolling this to keep noise disruptions to a minimum and cars that are not roadworthy making excessive sounds eliminated off our streets entirely. But the reality is, any one of these noisy vehicles that's been mentioned tonight could park in Packington Street and slam its doors 150 times out the front, and there's nothing that can be done about it, or very little that can be done about it. So I think that the likelihood of it happening in the car park and in the McDonald's premises when it's operating as a drive-through venue is very low. So I'm satisfied with the motion that's on the screen, and I commend that to my colleagues.
Councillor Park, we return to you to wrap up debate. Thank you.
Nothing further, Chair.
Okay. I will now put the motion on the screen. All of those in favour? All of those opposed? The motion is carried.
Call a division, Chair.
A division has been called. All of those in favour? Councillor Park, Councillor Sinfield, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Addis, Councillor Franco and Councillor Bigger. All of those opposed. I said he jumped in before you. Oh, me. And Councillor Galt. All of those opposed. Lisa Hollingsworth, Councillor Hollingsworth, and the Councillor Watson and Councillor Stavro are opposed. Have we got that all recorded? I shall say again, carried. Welcome back, Councillor Thompson. We will move directly on to general business. Councillors, are there any matters of general business? There are none. Councillor, are there any matters of urgent business? There are none. Any items of confidential business? There are none. I will now close the meeting. Before closing the meeting, I want to thank all of you who have joined us this evening. I declare the Urban Planning Delegated Committee meeting closed. Thank you very much for your attendance. Good night.